Hi there, welcome back to my beautiful disclosure channel, disclosing and opening doors that many people don't want to open. But on this channel, we open them. We open the tunnels too, and we look inside the caves, the very caves of darkness. Now, before we go into that kind of information from this beautiful woman, Rachel Vaughan, who is a survivor of a family that she was born into with her siblings, ritualizing, satanic, horrendous horrors you've never even imagined were possible. But this lady has survived with her mind, her body, and her soul. She is such a beautiful soul, so pure, so serene, so lovely. I'm so proud to know her. The great joy that has come from her trauma has led her to be sharing now as a real solid voice on our planet of ley lines and energy and just beautiful information of the earth itself. And she's going to be speaking at Uluru, the conference from the 20th to the 22nd of December in Australia. I'll come back to that a bit later, but for now, let me welcome my friend, Rachel Vaughan.
Lovely to see you, Danny. And I have to say thank you, and you make my heart sing when I see you too.
We're so lucky. Oh gosh, thanks, darling. Yeah, we've been obviously having quite a long chat before we hit record and just honoring you for how difficult it is. You know, it's not just a random story, what you share, it does affect you. And I remember our first interview together, you were explaining to me that if you seem like you're emotionless, it's because that's how you get to deliver. And it hurt my heart that you would even have to say that, you know, but you are so brave and you do represent a voice of Australia and the underground and the hidden and the unseen and the hidden hand. And so we're going to go into some of the details of this life that you've lived thus far on the dark side. And we'll start with the rituals, and you just go where you feel led.
Well, so one of the very first memories I have is as a toddler, and an expert on SRA told me this was actually a ritual as well. So that was in what was a butcher, a building right next to that. And my father took me there. I was barely able to stand, and I had to watch while he was basically putting two cadavers into two suitcases. So sorry that it's come into something so horrendous so early, but when you talk about rituals, this is the sort of stuff that you get. So that was one of the first memories that I have, having to watch that. And it was a steel lined room, completely lined with stainless steel. And I can still remember the sounds and things, and this is one of the things that a lot of ritual abuse survivors will talk about. It's not just a visual memory. You will have feelings in your body when you remember. You'll have sounds and smells. And they leave really interesting, imprints. So, I have issues with hair on the floor, and I still do have that problem because of the things that I saw. Bathroom floors and things really messed with my head. I find it difficult to go into hairdressers and things like that because of that. So, it's fascinating, the weird nuances and issues that you have after you've had these sorts of experiences. And yeah, the reason why I mentioned, sometimes I will laugh when I'm talking about the most horrendous things. It's partly a coping mechanism, but it's also if you're rocking in the corner, people don't want to watch that. They're not interested in hearing the story, and you don't get the message out, and people don't get healed by it. So you have to be the best possible representation of people who've gone through this when you do these sorts of interviews. I have one particular troll who would come onto every interview I've ever done and say, "Oh, she's laughing, she's having fun." It's just ridiculous. So I mean, clearly it's not somebody who understands the trauma and the human mind. So that's the reason why I share that. I had some, well, there was quite a few rituals that I was involved in. Some were open air. So one in particular I have spoken about quite extensively, where there was a massive bonfire, and I think I spoke about this on your channel last time, but they had Boy Scouts come and actually do the hard work to bring in the sticks and the wood, and these were little boys in uniform. They came in a bus, and they helped produce all the litter, I suppose, or the stuff to burn. Then they were gone. I lost time, and then the the adults turned up over a period, other children turned up. And that was the one where I've described seeing a baby unalived. And the person who presided over that ended up in a very powerful political position in my state. And this is the way that the mentorship occurs in places like Adelaide, South Australia. I know that this happens in Sydney and Victoria in Australia as well. Tasmania is known for it also. I'm sure it happens in the other states and territories as well, but you just don't hear about it as much. So these groups, they do these rituals on purpose because it aligns them with each other. They have material on each other. They can't speak against each other. And there's a whole series of really this is a Freemasonic thing. So a lot of cults are either Freemasons, Eastern Star sect, which is the female version. You've got the Rosicrucian version also, which is the Scottish rite. They'll do this so that they've got blackmail material on each other. And you're seeing this now with the state-sanctioned trafficking of children that you see in most Western countries now. It happens in America, the UK, Australia. You had riots in Leeds recently. That was because they took some children away from some parents for an absolutely ridiculous reason, and people stood up. And thank God they did. Thank God they did. And why doesn't that happen more often? I mean, it shouldn't be possible for this to occur. So in those situations, it's a blackmail situation again. So you'll get a family that's fighting. Parents are against each other. One might recognise that the other one's doing something terrible to the children. That'll get out in some sort of statement to police. And then the police go around and know they can own the abuser. And then they can traffic their child. And so, it's quite horrendous how intricately woven the web is so that these people have control. Thankfully, now I see that that is absolutely disintegrating what control they had. And the experience with Leeds is just a perfect example of that. They can't keep it hidden anymore. People are reacting to it. People know enough now to stand up. So some of the other rituals that I was involved in, it was there was a whole. It wasn't just the sitting around with the items on the floor and the chanting and that stuff. There's a whole series of events that lead up to it. So at 14, I was taken by my MK Ultra abuser and handler and programmer, the main female one. She took me to buy a dress for some sort of special dinner that I had to go to. I didn't realize that it was another form of initiation. I'd had many, but I did feel uncomfortable and nervous about it. And it had to be this black and white dress specifically. And I was taken to this Tudor style resort, which was also black and white, Tudor style white, sort of with these weird sort of black sort of buildings. And then sat at a particular table, and these certain events occurred. And then we were taken out to a back room, and a pretty horrible experience occurred where a whole series of events happened. And I was married to somebody. I'd already had a betrothal ceremony with my father where he tried to sell my soul as well, but I thankfully muttered under my breath that I was giving my soul to Jesus. It's so convoluted and complicated what they do. And if you look at some of the secret books of Freemasonry, you'll see after a certain oath, if they break that oath, there is a specific ritualistic murder or torture or a removal of limbs. They do things very specifically, and it's all about terrorization. It's all about control. What's happening now is incredible because the veil that was keeping everybody in cognitive dissonance, that was preventing people from understanding that these things really do happen, that is lifting. It's disintegrating very rapidly. And I believe that's because we've got some very powerful energies changing with the ley lines, with the Earth's energy lines. It's basically her soul, her meridian system is coming to life. We're moving into a higher frequency, and it's affecting everybody. And it's interesting what you're saying before about the energies at the moment are really very intense and can be quite scattered. So if anybody's feeling that, don't be hard on yourself. It's just how it is. It's just how it is. And it will probably be like that on and off, particularly until December this year, when the ley lines do come into that permanent harmony time. It's a very magical time to be alive, but we need to sort of be pretty vigilant that we're taking care of ourselves, doing as much cleansing and clearing as we possibly can, putting protection techniques up, and just being aware of what's going on, just observing, trying not to don't get caught up in the fear porn. just observe and be aware of what everything is happening.
Yeah, so important. Let's step aside from the rituals and the darkness, and thank you again for sharing so much. It is horrendous, but needs to be shared. As you've raised the beautiful frequency of the earth and the dragon lines, let's share with this beautiful audience what exactly is happening and what will be happening with the dragon lines at Uluru. It's just so precious, and you've been chosen to be there.
I'm so honored. So this is the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, and I was invited to go. I desperately wanted to go to Uluru. So just to preface it, Uluru is this incredible, sacred, massive rock in the center of Australia, and it is the crossing point of two dragon lines. Dragon lines are the largest of the ley lines on the planet, and they are massive. We had 6 pairs up until 2017 when a new dragon line appeared, another new one appeared in 2018, and another new one in 2019. And that was just before we have all these crazy things that happen on this planet. So that was that influx of frequency, that influx of powerful earth energy. That's what's, I think, apart from the solar codes that are coming in, all the other amazing codes that are coming in, that's part of this awakening. It's a big part of this awakening. There's an amazing man called Rory Duff, who's a geobiologist, and he has foretold in an interview with Pam Gregory, who's one of my favorite astrologers, she's very lovely, that in December of this year, all of the ley lines on this planet will go into what's called permanent harmony time. Now, the harmony time of the ley lines normally is for a few hours or a few days around the equinoxes and solstices. We're coming into permanent harmony time in December of this year. As far as I know, I mean, the Earth might have gone through this through the ages previously, but we certainly haven't had this in many thousands of years, if not tens of thousands or possibly millions of years. This is a significant event. I tried to sort of organize to go to Uluru in June of this year, and it just didn't work out. I just remember feeling this feeling, it's just not the right time. Just give it up. Don't worry about it. Do another time. I sort of talked to my course members about maybe meeting them up there, and it just didn't feel right. And then just out of the blue, these beautiful people at the Cosmic Consciousness Conference invited me up. So I realized now I wasn't supposed to go in June because I was supposed to be there in December when the harmony comes in. And it's quite funny because I've been a psychic for my whole life, and I've been using my psychic abilities professionally for over 20 years. And I'd always heard stories about, you know, particularly in the last 10 years, about us coming into 5D. And I just sort of thought, oh, well, isn't that a sweet little fairy tale? And that sounds really nice. And I wish it could happen, but, you know, I didn't believe it was possible. But as soon as Rory Duff said they were coming into this permanent harmony time in December, it's like, because I know the ley lines are 5th dimensional frequency, I just suddenly recognized and realized, oh, good grief, that's it. I can suddenly see that's how it's possible. It never occurred to me that it wasn't more than just a, you know, a dream or a hope. It's literal. So my belief is that once we come into that time, it's going to be very, very difficult for the attachments and the darker elements to have power here. They really will struggle. They're already struggling. That's why we're seeing all this weird stuff going on. They will find it very, very, very difficult. So I have great hope. I put out a post a couple of days ago, was it yesterday, about the golden age, that there are all these beautiful ancient prophecies of a golden age coming. And actually Catherine, for the Cosmic Consciousness Conference, put out an article of her own sort of describing that and some of the words that I'd put together a couple of days ago. We're coming into a time. So there was Greek mythology around 1,000 years of golden age. There's the Satya Yuga of the Kali Yuga prophecy of 1,000 years of golden age. And they all talk about this time of harmony. And I'm realizing that's the harmony time. I recognized that this was coming in 2020 when I read an article on the Satya Yuga. And it was another one of those moments like watching Rory Duff and Pam Gregory having this conversation. Suddenly everything made sense to me because I had been seeing all of these little babies coming in around 2015 because I read auras with gold halos around them. And I'm thinking, this is really interesting. And I intuitively realized Jesus Christ had the same sort of gold aura, and this is a Christed frequency. This is a, you know, a gold soul frequency. well, now I know why we're going into the golden age as well. So humanity holding a high frequency helps the earth to get to these higher levels. So it's this influx of gold souls that are coming in that have brought about, along with all of the other codes coming in and solar flares and everything else, has brought us to this higher frequency as well. So it literally, I know it's been hard the last 4 years, and for some of us it's been hard all of our lives, but it's worth it to come to this point. It is worth it, because we're going to see a completely different paradigm coming up. The dark will not have rain.
That's right. I love the way you said that. The dark will not have rain. And they are getting a clue now. I mean, there's an element that still truly believe that they're going to dominate the planet. They're going to roll out Zaveth. I see Clown Schwab was stepped down. About time. Those old windbags, him and Soros and the other satanic, that people don't realize they were sitting ahead of there's the Pindar and the Phoenix of the Brotherhood. I mean, it's a very real thing. And like, why would some Hungarian bloke be actually advising America? Like, people don't seem to sometimes think around and beyond what's actually happening. Who are the big old windbags at the top? Some of them host the most evil, demonic energy, and we're just so programmed. Admire authority, be respectful. No, they're all a load of bollock heads. Do not respect them. That's how we got in trouble. It's time to wake up, wake up, wake up. God, my God. There were so many things in that beautiful last expression that opened, in me. You mentioned about psychic children, and, we all have abilities. We know that. Someone like you, who was also being trained and groomed from birth, probably in the womb, with the rituals and the abuses begin in satanic families of which you were born into. Just say for us, if you can, your dead dad, the pedo murderer, his name.
So his name's Alan Maxwell McIntyre, or it was Alan Maxwell McIntyre. He was, a lot of these pedos use their middle name. So his name was Max, like people knew him as Max, but his first name was Alan, which was, an acronym, or you could turn the letters around for something else that he had a propensity for. So yeah, very, very co-opted soul. I often wonder if he was just simply, I know he was traumatized. He was definitely traumatized, because his grandfather was the head of the Freemasons. Joseph Wright was a very high up Freemason, Grand President of the Grand Lodge. So I know he would have had abuse. And apparently his mother was head of the Eastern Star Sect, which is the female version of Freemasonry. No doubt she got into that position because of her father's position. So, he probably didn't have much chance. But, I was brought up in a terrible family, and I didn't go dark. It is a choice. It is a choice. People choose the wrong path, and he chose the wrong path.
You're right. It is a choice, Rachel. All these people that are raised being beaten up by their parents, and they get to have their own, and they don't go ahead and beat them or harm them. So it definitely is a choice. And if that triggers somebody, oh, well, there's a trigger. When we get triggered, we can then take some action, move to action, whether it's a scream, a cry, a yell, a laugh, it doesn't matter, as long as we're moving the pain out of us. But with the psychic children, as you went through the horrors and were groomed, and your natural ability was there, but it was definitely enhanced with protocols that the cult, the dark satanic cult, have and have been using for decades. With me, as a very psychic child, my horror and terror was the demonics and the bad energy and the hauntings in the house and the land I lived in the area, a very repressed, violent area. So I naturally honed mine. Well, the other night this week, I hung out with a couple and really nice people. And the lady in particular, at some point in her life was trained at a very high level of magic. And she sat with that weird bloke with the crazy eyebrows, Aquino. Is it Michael Aquino? I feel so sick when I see him, look at him. I didn't even know what he was. But just the look, it's that vibe, there's something butchery and bastardy and evil about him. And then, oh my God, so she trained with him. But here's the thing. And I believe her. She never, ever saw. There were so many people at her level of high magic, you know, at the temple of Seth that bloke created or set, but she never saw it. But that, it makes sense. It makes sense, you know. It's like, I remember years ago going to a party with people at this great house on this great land in California, and there was lovely people, and all of a sudden the shift, I'm like, what was that? I'm like, are these people on drugs? It just, something shifted at the, what a lovely time. And I was mostly with the friends I went with, you know, and then I felt it. And there was this man, he was a huge giant man with a giant belly. He hasn't seen his willy for forever. He walked around and he came over to me and he said, we're going to have a gathering. It's not for everybody, but we'd like to invite you. And then I realized it was a sex party, an orgy. And I am not your girl for that. I'm so not that girl. And I told my friends, I went, oh my God, I said, I think we need to go. This is going downhill. That I just got invited into this skank party. And then one of the guys we were sitting with, he went, yeah, because I thought you'd be up for it. I'm like, no, mate, wrong girl. You leave. But they then started, like, people that were there for that going in the house and shutting the doors. I'm like, holy God, it was so beyond ick. It was so, and then the man kept calling me, trying to get me to a meeting of some nonsense, and oh, it was horrible. But I know I went off a bit off track there, but again, for people to recognize, you know, that we come in with these abilities to sense and to sense them. But
Yes.
so my point again is being invited, like this lady I'm talking about, the high ritual magic, she never saw anything. She never saw anything at that level, but there were signs, like me at the party, for example, there are signs you start to see. Anyway, this lady and her husband has also trained in high magic in different ways. They are so in love. They are so cohesive together. It was lovely to see them in their body language and their genuine, he adores her. And, you know, people can say, well, they've done a Ouija, and they've done a Ouija at levels, and I'm so against a Ouija, I talk about it a lot. But this couple, the lady, when we were talking, I said, I understand you've been trained in a Ouija at a very high level, meaning you can also see everything that comes in when you open that portal. But most people don't. They don't see what they open up to, and they try and get ahead in their spiritual growth, and they end up being possessed. You know, it's awful. So I wanted to say that about the different levels of training where not everybody gets involved in that, but the signs of you are being groomed, the systems all have elements of this in there, don't they?
They absolutely do. And it's interesting, you know, when you mentioned Akina with the eyebrows, he specifically trains them to look like horns. You know, that's a pretty big sign that someone's dark. But I know that his bent was hypnosis. So she probably wasn't able to pick up on what he was doing, because he would have, you know, my father had rapid induction techniques that involved hand movements. He would have control of people through these hand movements. So yeah, he was a magician in some way as well. And that's what these people learn, this stuff, so that they will have these abilities. But the thing with magic is there's good magic and there's dark magic. When people use dark magic, they've sold some of their soul or all of their soul to have that ability. And usually they'll take on an entity that controls it through them. So for instance, you know, Aleister Crowley was known for tripping people up from behind. He could get within the auric system and trip them up so they fell over. I mean, you know, it's just a party trick. It's not very special, not very significant, but, you know, obviously he thought that was enough to sell his soul for. So, and I can understand why your friend might not have picked up on it, because these people are very well trained in this way. With the orgies, that sex magic, that is another way that it creates a familiarity. It's also about ranks. So certain people have to, you know, they might be young and beautiful, but they have to have, you know, convergence with the old people, I suppose, that they might not necessarily find attractive, because it gives them power in the sect, in the group. I mean, you know, I had a family member who would regularly organize orgies, and she was very open about it. And she's one of the ones that goes against me and my siblings speaking out about what our father was involved with. She just thinks it's normal. It's not normal. This is not normal behavior. It's debauched. And fine if people want to do that, if they think that's normal. But when you start to do those sorts of behaviors, you are being governed by the sacral chakra, the sexual chakra. You're being governed, and there's nothing wrong with the sacral chakra. This is where babies come in, but it can be darkened, it can be influenced, it can be used in the wrong way. And sex magic is not something that people really need to be mucking around with, in my opinion, because the likelihood of danger of calling on the wrong kind of energies and bringing them in, it's significant. You have to be very, very careful. It's very different to the sort of magic that you might produce for somebody that you truly love, especially when you want to make a baby. That is so powerful. If you want to use that magic to create life, that is very, very different. That's a completely different thing. I believe that all children are psychically open. From my understanding, the veil that stops us from realizing how psychically open we are, that stops us from remembering past lives, that stops us from seeing the things under the bed and the scary things that you saw, darling, and you obviously didn't have anybody around you that would help you with that, which is terrible. Those things seem to start to dim and fade around the age of 5 for most children. Some, like us, never get to ignore it. It's always there. The idea is that you would hope to choose parents that would protect you in some way. Did you have anybody who could protect you?
No, but our dogs did save my life, because the worst night when there were all these demonics
Yes.
pressing down, using some kind of magic, pressing down like a mattress and suffocating me, and I was losing breath. And there was a huge demonic on the wall that was advising them. And then the dogs heard me screaming, squealing, because obviously the high-pitched decibels, dogs picked that up, and they're scratching at the door. And then my mum and dad got alerted, and they came in, and I was like barely breathing. Yeah. So yeah, had my dog. And I had Jesus. Jesus turned up in my room one day with the angels. So that was good. That was good.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus was basically the patron saint of children. They don't really sort of connect that dot often enough, because I know so many survivors who had connection to Jesus also. And it wasn't the other archangels or angels specifically. He was the one that came to them. And I've had a connection with Jesus ever since I was very small also. Like I said, I gave my soul to him at a time when I really, given what I was going through, I certainly didn't get religious instruction apart from the satanic stuff, but I knew who he was. And I knew that that's where my soul was aligned, and I didn't want anything to do with what these people were up to and what my father was trying to sell me into. So, children can be unbelievably wise, because again, they've come from the soul world. They are still, that veil hasn't descended completely. They haven't forgotten who they really are. Yeah, children. And I think this is another reason, well, no, it's another reason why they play with children, they use children. Partly they are jealous, because children have beautiful, sullied souls, even though the Catholic faith will tell you that you are born of sin, which is absolutely ridiculous. That they're perfect and pure, and they'll go to heaven when they pass. And these people that sell their soul, they know what's coming for them. They know that it's dark. They know that they're not going to ever get their soul back. They know where they're going when they pass. It's very, very sad. Can you imagine the nightmare of a life that would be? And I watched my father on a daily basis. I could see him grappling with that. He might have had power, but he certainly wasn't happy.
Wow. As we've raised certain subjects, and I know people watching this will be thinking about current times and what we just watched, the debauchery on Paris, in Paris. It was so interesting, the propaganda, the media. So they show this, whatever that was, which we'll go into a bit, because I'd love to get your take on it. And that it was like, oh, you silly, ignorant people. The headless woman was Marie Antoinette, and this and that. And they tried to wrap it in a different, bouquet. Like, no, the big fat blue man on the plate, offering himself up to be cannibalized, was Dionysus, the Greek god. What's wrong with you, uneducated people? The Olympics is about, they're from the Greeks, the Olympians, whatever. And then they're arguing on Facebook, and people are so, no, this is wrong. And wow, what is your take on what you watched?
Now, I've only watched snippets because I just don't allow myself to have that sort of stuff come into my field anymore. But because I run a Telegram chat, I did see quite a bit of it. And I was actually heartened by the fact that there has been such a backlash. This is not like the 2012 Olympics where people are looking at this enormous demon over these beds of all these children. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
And wondering, what on earth? Now they're knowing exactly what they're doing. They know that's about cannibalistic references. They know what's going on. I'm actually, I know it's disgusting, but I'm overjoyed because it's waking so many people up. And from my understanding, they had to take it down. Like they couldn't, they stopped advertising it. They stopped actually allowing people to watch it. So that is a massive victory. That is a massive victory. We are not back in 2020 where people were saying conspiracy theorists, this and that. We are at the point where the majority of people now know that is disgusting and that is wrong. There was a child at the front at one point that was touching itself or herself, or himself. I don't even know what gender the child was because you can't tell anymore. But because of what they were doing there, obviously was not about the representation of a particular gender that they were born with. But the child was touching themselves in a too familiar way for a child of that age, and an adult had kind of instigated it. And I had people in the chat saying that there was somebody saying that that child had been trafficked. That was a trafficked child that was actually on stage there. The fact that that came out also is massive. So all these people saw this weird ritual. It was a ritual, and they saw this little child touching themselves in a weird sort of kind of sexual way, instigated by an adult, and they're all protective and saying this is disgusting. We can't have this. I mean, if the majority of people had just said, oh yes, it's just people on stage making a play of things, and isn't it funny, and let's all be woke, then it would be very distressing. But that's not what happened. That's not what happened. People are disgusted. Everywhere in the world, everybody's disgusted. I don't think there's terribly many people who looked at that and thought this is going to be a good idea. Obviously, the people involved, I mean, it's probably just as well they're in costume, because if they were acting, if that was purely just an act to wake people up, because I really don't know, I really couldn't tell you from looking at that if those people were truly genuine or if they were acting to wake people up. I find this whole, what's been happening in the last couple of years with these people wandering around that clearly are not the original politicians that we had before, I find it incredibly perplexing. So instead of having an opinion, I just sit back and I just watch, and I'm just like, wow, this is crazy. This is crazy. But I'm not surprised, because we're coming up to a time when, again, attachments, the puppeting demonic entities will not be able to exist here for very much longer. They're pulling at every stop and they're not succeeding. All that seems to be working is that we are all waking up more and more, which is inevitable because the veil is disintegrating and people are seeing the truth. And after 18 years of talking about what happened to me, finally being validated, as you said in one of our interviews, being with this victim of crime, validation payment, it's just unbelievable to me. If I went back 10 years and the horrible things that people were saying about me online, and the trolls and my family that just had cognitive dissonance or were terrified of losing their credentials that they've been handed on a platter, like I was handed on my platter, I never believed, I never would have understood that this was coming. Even with the gift of prophecy, I couldn't see that this was coming. So to be standing here now, or sitting here now, in your beautiful company talking about this, it's a really amazing time to be alive.
It is so amazing on so many levels. And yeah, that whole, to me, that was a ritual. It was clearly a ritual. It was so sickening, and it was so weird, and it was so off. It was like a minor chord as opposed to a major chord of kind of harmony. It was so dissonant and disturbing, and all that, and I feel sorry for people who genuinely are transgender and don't want to look like freakoids, don't want to look like male drag queens, hideously unattractive, the real genuine people that have needed to do something for self, but not the parody of it that we saw, and it's sad because there's an element of a small group of people on our planet, and I've met a few, and I counseled as a therapist. There was a couple, they were both women, and one changed to a man. And he suffered so much. They never talk about the injections they had to stick in their bodies every single day. It is not easy at all. So it's a shame that their drive to be all inclusive and, you know, look a certain way because they've changed gender, that it gets also kind of swept up in that as a oneness. So, you know, we've got to obviously have compassion for our brothers and our sisters and those on our planet. Yeah, so thank you for your insight there on that, because it is obviously definitely in our faces, and it is very interesting to see how many people are so triggered. They're just so triggered by it. Now, obviously there was an assassination attempt on Trump. I was shocked at how many people were like, he missed. Like, how did we get that debased in our morals that it's okay to shoot another man live on television? Are we not still traumatized from Kennedy? You know, this is not okay. It's never going to be okay. And then with that happening, and then they're missing, and then Biden, you know, got stepped down and then said he's got COVID. No, he doesn't. He's, you know, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to get into it. You know, I feel sorry only for the fact that it's an old doddery man. But people are so determined to have this as their president that they're not looking. It's like the emperor's new clothes. When are we going to get past the emperor's new clothes? He's an old man and he's not fit for purpose. Get over it. Get someone else in. Stop lying to yourselves. It's like this whole, but we're there, and it's so intense for people. People are so crazed and they're so angry and they're so falling apart. But everyone's opportunity is there to look here, look inside, do that healing. Stop lying. Yeah, but Trump did this and Trump did that, and half the things that people say this person and that person did, they didn't. And you've got no proof because you weren't there in the room. You're listening to both sides of ownership, propaganda. It never stops. Let's.
I love, sorry, can I just say, I love the fact that you use the emperor's new clothes metaphor, because it's not the same Biden. It's such a brilliant metaphor, Danny, because the earlobes are different. So, you know, it's obviously somebody or someone in a mask. I don't know what's going on there. But yes, it's so weird to me that people can't see that. I find that, again, perplexing. I'm just sitting back looking and thinking, seriously? But I see a lot of people that used to look a certain way and don't look that way anymore. Someone shared a picture of, I don't know if it was a Kardashian or if it was another songstress. I couldn't tell the difference between a Kardashian and this woman that used to sing, and I can't think of her name, of course, because we're recording. But they look the same. It's like they're coming out of a carbon copy factory, and they don't even have the same features anymore. It's honestly, I just get so confused.
Yeah, it's
All I know is in my heart is saying that is not the original person. I don't know what's going on here. I don't want to go into too many conspiracy theories, but this is weird. Can't everybody see that? So Emperor's New Clothes, brilliant, brilliant.
wow. And the fact that the way people change look, this manufactured image of what beauty is, that has been pushed so hard, you know, and everyone's influenced, you know, sometimes unconsciously influenced, and it's just so like, this is what beauty is. And okay, well, I don't agree. All right, let's take a step back into some of the areas that we were going to share with your childhood and what you went through with your dead evil dad. We mentioned the rituals, and now we're going to move a little bit into your father's trophies.
Yeah, so I'll try to be very careful about what I say here because I don't want to trigger too many people. But you know, when you get to the point where people unalive, large numbers of people, they will keep mementos. And unfortunately, that's something that my father was involved in. So it wasn't just that he took the remains of the 3 Beaumont children, which is a big case in my country. 3 children who were taken all from the same family, the only 3 children that this poor couple had. My father got hold of them, unalived them, and then buried them on his own property in an old sinkhole. Well, that's not the only thing that needs to be, you know, looked into on that property. My grandfather, who also had ownership of that property before my father did, was a telecommunications officer, just as my father was. My father had a home with a telecommunications bunker under it in Macklin Street in Edwardstown. My grandfather's property has something very interesting underneath it also, which I haven't talked about very much in public, but it needs to be known that there's a hatch in the large shed that moves around. My father would have a habit of, you know, he would have an access point. He would keep something on there so you couldn't find it, a boat or something that, you know, you couldn't see what was underneath the bit of rug that the boat was sitting on. And then he would put an extra concrete pad down on the whole place. He would just start concreting again. And then the hatch would be moved somewhere else. Now, this is a large space underneath the main shed. So that needs to be known. And I've made that, I've spoken about it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about it because I know that, you know, you've got a very discerning audience. And there's enough about that property now out that it needs to be known. And I'm not the only person who saw that, who has knowledge of that space. That's not the only thing. There are many sinkholes in that area. I have I've been informed that there's another area with a cave on the foreshore where there's an old half a gravestone. Someone's dragged a half a gravestone into this place. Now, the ocean couldn't carry a half granite gravestone into this space. He or somebody else dragged it in there. It's a marker for something. I was also forced as a 5-year-old to, where you get a sinkhole in a gully. So what happens in a gully is if you've got sandstone or limestone, as the water travels down the gully, it'll leak through in certain places and create a space, an open space where and as the water trickles through, it goes through another underground tunnel out to the ocean. Well, there are several of these on that property, and he found the opening of one of them. Must have found it a very long time ago, but at 5, he made me follow him in to a very small tunnel. I had to walk on my hands and knees, as usual. He was well protected. He had a wetsuit on. I had my hands and my little knees, and I was in a little top and skirt. I got all cut up because, you know, when you've got limestone, it's not soft. and along the coast of South Stansbury, it's really sharp rock, the way that the wind and the water erodes it. So I had to, there was a little bit of calcification, thank God, so that my hands weren't too cut up. So I had to follow him through this tunnel that he had to shimmy through because it was quite small. At the end of this tunnel, there was this sinkhole. There was a little bit of light in there because there was a hole at the top where the water was coming through. And he had all of these skulls, small skulls, and they had green kind of mildewy kind of a green sheen on the ones that were on the top. But there were so many there, it created a small like fence or wall inside this sinkhole. And at 5, I don't think I could count to 50 at 5. I was too little. So I have an understanding from the memory that there would have been roughly about 50 skulls in there. Now, hundreds of children went missing from the orphanages and boys' home close to my childhood home that still are missing. There was 4,000, I believe, UK children brought over to Australia. 2,000 of those never were seen of again. So we're talking huge numbers of children. And my father was responsible for processing many of them. And he kept these things. He kept them on the property. Now, when he died in 2017, this was right in the middle of an investigation. I'd finally found the right member of parliament who'd stood up for me and insisted on an investigation. And the man who was the police minister at the time is our current premier. Now, the investigation began in 2017 or 2016, 2017, and then my father promptly died, which was very convenient. And then the investigation ceased because you can't convict a corpse, is what I was literally told by a special crimes detective. On the night that he died at 1 o'clock in the morning, the other person who lives on that property as a family member of mine was burning fires. And the fires smelt very odd. And I won't necessarily say what they smelt like, but it smelt like some of these trophies were being burnt. So, you know, we have reams of evidence that have been lost. You know, there were mainstream journalists at the property at that time smelling this, that they couldn't report on it. They did ask this particular family member, and, you know, that there's footage of him being asked, you know, what were you burning? Oh, just what was it? Just Timbermate or something, just timber or wood or something, he was saying as he walked off. Oh gosh, you know, that whole property has to be completely razed to the ground, completely razed to the ground, and then some. It has to go underground, that whole place, and it should be a monument to all of these children eventually. Some sort of place where people can go and pay their respects. It's a graveyard already. It should be treated as such.
Do you think your dad was bumped off?
Oh, I would say 100%. He was already in a nursing home, but prior to his death, he was strong enough and fit enough to assault one of the nurses. So I know that happened. So, he wasn't on his deathbed at that point. And the only reason why he ended up in there was because one of my other family members had been keeping him in her house with her 3 small children, despite all the allegations that we had made. And this is why I spoke out, Danny, because I've got young family members and idiots in my family that wouldn't protect them from him. And so she had gotten so frustrated with him at that point, she'd shoved him in a home. Not before she'd changed his will. So I think that's why she got him in there. Charming individual. Yeah, so I think he got the pillow treatment or something. Someone got rid of him because the investigation was going on. And my father had a weird tendency. He would be doing these terrible things, but he would also be whistleblowing at the same time. He had a tendency to write letters. He believed he knew what happened in the NCA bombing, which is a famous bombing case in my country. He put his hand up for a lot of things, actually. He said he knew this and he knew that and he knew what happened here and there. So he was obviously had alters, he was all over the place. I've got quite a few of those letters.
That's so interesting. Okay, I think we've covered in previous conversations the tragedy of this so-called father helping himself to your little tiny body and those of your siblings in a way that a father should never, no one should ever do, the things that went over and over and over again in your little life. I remember you sharing that that he would do that, but also when there was a ritual where you were dressed as a bride and you mentioned it, but literally it was a betrothal to Satan, but also a sickening link with him too. I mean, again, for people that have never heard, some of these, situations that we're sharing, this is real, this is reality, this satanic occult, the hidden hand, the dark magic with a K has been happening for so many years, so many years. And I heard someone the other day who's he says it's Aleister Crowley, pronounce it properly. And this man who said that is somewhat of a scholar. He studied, Aleister for many, many years. So I don't know. I don't care how to pronounce the man's name, but, that just came up. But goodness, yeah, it's hard for people. And sometimes people say, I couldn't watch anymore, and I understand that. But we've got to push past that too, because, there's no point being precious. We need to be loving and supportive and listen to people like you and your testimony and understand it is absolutely true. Not only is it true, and you've been so brave, you just took the Australian government to its very knees. You were awarded a pathetic amount of compensation because it was proven that you are and were harmed. You are a victim of crime. And can you just give us a synopsis of that? Because it is historical and it was you that did it in all of Australia.
Yeah, so it's very, very rare. So people do get victim of crime payments, but it's usually for things that aren't the sort of things that I talk about. And it's certainly not when you have no conviction. It's extremely rare. So a barrister friend of my brother, when he told him that I'd had this payment, it's called an ex gratia payment, and it's at the discretion of the Attorney General. So it's for someone who doesn't have a conviction against the abuser. And the barrister said that just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen in this state. But I've had that happen. So the thing is, they couldn't really ignore it anymore because a major crime detective had already told my brother that they know our father was involved with the Beaumont disappearance. So if he's involved with that and they're acknowledging that, then he's obviously involved with the abuses that I've been speaking about. And I have reams of evidence of medical reports, procedures I've had to go through, a statutory declaration from my mother because he ran me over in an attempt to kill me. She was present and watched him pulling me out. There is my psychiatric report that I name all the most important people that abused me in. So they can't ignore that anymore. And it's interesting, there was one particular individual named in that psychiatric report and many of my statutory declarations who was investigated for abusing me as a child, my father's best friend. He was investigated in 2018. As usual, you know, they just deny it and they get away with it. He has thrown my father under the bus and said that my father introduced him to the Beaumont children. So that is another witness account that, and, you know, he's obviously thrown my father under the bus trying to protect himself. Maybe he's getting some sort of deal. He's very old and he's got prostate cancer. Yay. So, you know, I really do believe that it's all just about to come out. And this is why I'm speaking about what's underground at Stansbury now, at my father's former property. That needs to be investigated. God knows what's happening in there now. Who knows if there's still people being taken in there? I don't know. I don't go there. I wouldn't be silly enough to go there because I might end up in there. So, you know, these hidden spaces underground are the most dangerous because you can't hear sound. Nobody expects it to be there. I spent 2.5 years pulling together through the research of others and my own, the evidence of the tunnels that I was trafficked through as a child. It took 2.5 years to do that because I couldn't get help from council because they pretend it doesn't exist. And I can sort of understand why. Who wants to know that there's a tunnel under their house that's making their house collapse or their shed or whatever else? So, you know, what's hidden underground needs to come to the surface in many different ways. It's very important that, you know, there's a lot of talk now of people understanding that a lot of trafficking occurs underground. A dear friend of mine, Emma Catherine, who has the Imagination podcast, she does very much like what you do. You know, she gives a voice to people that YT doesn't normally allow to speak on their channels. And she shared a post on Twitter, and it was something about British Telecom having a new brain chip, where you can have this chip put in your brain to improve your memory. The telecommunications companies in Western countries are intrinsically evil, in my opinion. My father was a telecom operative. He was an ASIO operative. He had a telecommunications bunker. They have these underground spaces. They use them for nefarious purposes. It's not just about allowing you to make a phone call or use your internet. These spaces, there are all these tunnels all over Australia, every main street, every main road. A lot of those tunnels and pits are huge and they're walkable, and things can be trafficked through them. People, contraband, anything.
Yeah, two things there, telecoms and bunkers. So first of all, telecoms, communications, satellite communications also. Last night, I went to pop out with a family member to go get something. And then I realized that my lights weren't coming on. And the car I have, they call it a smart car, whatever. I've got no interest. Haven't even hooked my phone up to it because, you know, I know that these cars can be remote controlled, you know, by the asshats at the top. And I get a few yards down the road and say to my family, there's a problem. I'm not driving. We've got to get the car back to the house. It's dangerous. There's no lights coming on. And that happened because I allowed, you know, sometimes, you know, we make errors. I mean, I'm always doing that. I let this man clean my car, this poor man. I let him clean my car inside and out. And so while he's been doing whatever, he's obviously, you know, and I am not the brightest firework at the party. I just am not. And I'm sitting there last night trying to figure out with a light and trying to, where are the lights? And anyway, something happened and something started ringing, and we're ringing the manufacturer that's built into my car. I'm like, oh my God. Then this man answers the phone inside my car, inside the central console. A bloke answers, and it was the service. You know, where are you? Are you safe? Yes. What's going on? And I could hardly understand him. He had a very different accent to mine. And oh, it was just like, so I knew it. I know it. And then in the car contracts now, people really have to look because the asshats, can actually take control, remote control. And there was talk of an American actress who a car was driven into a wall at great speed, and there are some that said that car was remote control. So this is a very big area of, you know, we've got 5G. This was for flying cars and for teleports, and it was all meant to be. And yet we sit in our houses and the internet drops. You know what I mean? That level of technology was not meant for us. It was meant for them. Now, bunkers, we know there are gigantic military operations happening across the entire planet. There's often a military base where there is a phenomena like Uluru, let's say, which is also known as Ayers Rock in Great Britain, let's say, in other Western speaking countries. And these military bases have, many of them, situations that go down many levels, many stories, even miles underground. Now, the asshats, the most wealthy ones, they wasted an opportunity to do a deal and return some frequency keys and some very important information, and to unspell some of the black magic occult spelling that they did. And there was a meeting in Antarctica, which is a very, very, very active place. There's so much happening in Antarctica. Plus it has such a massive German influence. They even name some of the places there, New Berlin, New Schwabenland. It has all been proven. A friend of ours at the channel, Brad Olson, actually physically went down there and photographed. We can watch stuff online, but it's good that, he's a friend. He came on my channel, he's spoken at my conference. I would love Brad Olson. But I don't want to get too distracted here, because these people wasted an opportunity. They thought they would be fine. These are the darkest of the dark. They are now stuck on the planet. Now, they can't get off planet on the anti-gravity crafts because the Galactic Federations or whatever it is that's coming in, including the American Space Fleet, which is called Solar Warden, the French Space Fleet, one of their craft is called the Solaris. Everyone is going to get a hammering who's harmed people on our planet. And the underground bunkers, these asshats have been making underground bunkers, and they think they're going to be hiding in their little bunkers until everything's calmed down. They've got to be joking. They think they're so wealthy, some of them, beyond our comprehension. They are going to know what's coming for them. And also humanity, as humanity is awakening very quickly, people say again, oh, humans aren't ready for it yet. It will shock the humans. Remember what Orson Welles did on the radio in the 1920s and everybody was scared? They say that because they're friggin' scared. And when humanity realizes that darkness rules this planet, evil and black magic rules this planet, it went nowhere. And the people that run it are so full of demonic entities that they've sold their soul. Singers, dancers, performers, every level of what we celebrate, what we're programmed to celebrate. And humanity isn't going to be shocked. Humanity is going to go mad, and they are going to come for those evil people. And that is what time it is.
Yes, absolutely, Dylan. Absolutely. You're so spot on. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes.
No, they won't be in any kind of shoes for very long, will they? Maybe concrete. Maybe concrete. As we go there a little bit, another thing for people to unfortunately acknowledge is that you were forced into filming, as was Kathy O'Brien as well. Like, you were filmed into filming porn with other children and adults. And some of these, you were a marked child that was allowed to live despite the almost unaliving several times of your own beautiful self. But they make what we call snuff films. People pay to watch children unalived. And these people are at the highest level of politics and academia, and that is a fact, and that can be proven, right?
It's absolutely horrifying. So I know there's still memories that need to come up of the snuff work that my father was involved in. I have little bits and pieces, but I try. Well, it's very hard. I don't want to look at it because it's so horrific. But he was definitely involved in that. He made a lot of child rape material. I was part of it on many occasions. I still don't really enjoy taking my photograph. I don't really like to be filmed, but it's not as bad as it used to be. I notice that sometimes when I'm doing interviews, even I pull a certain face that I used to pull as a child when I was being photographed and filmed. Because it's like, even as a small child, trying to make myself look as unattractive as possible, my jaw sort of takes over my face. And it still happens at times. It happens when I sing. I get this, it's very hard to just let myself vocalize because of the training and the programming to stop me from vocalizing. So even then, this jaw thing will happen. And I've seen it in others as well. I was talking to a survivor the other day, and she was talking about how that, she's got this locked jaw, and what my father was involved in if you can imagine it being possible, he did it. There was never any compassion, ever. There's no compassion for us, for any of his children of his own. Like, he didn't show compassion. There was nothing. It was like an empty vessel. He could pretend kindness in certain situations. If we're at a party, for instance, and it wasn't the group, it wasn't his group, it was a different group of people, he would pretend to be this magnanimous, wonderful father. And, you know, I remember going up to him at those times because I liked the pretend dad. I liked that pretend person because I wished and hoped that that would be the real person. And I often used to think, I wonder if he'll still be like that at the end of the party. But he never was. So, you know, what they have on the dark web, these people who do these things, they have no soul. You cannot do that sort of thing to a child and have a soul. So whatever was controlling my father in those times certainly wasn't human, in my opinion. I call them creatures when they have that emptiness. It's this dark emptiness. There's nothing human about it. It's the only way I can describe it. You know, and he would use knives on his own children. So, and this is the thing, you know, there were a whole series of children that went missing and were found, that, you know, that their remains were found, that there were knife wounds that he perpetrated on me, one of them. And, you know, I've got medical report to prove it, that he did that to me. But they still won't investigate him for those murders. I saw one of these murder victims, Richard Kelvin, in the underground cellar. And we were filmed together with another missing child who went missing within 6 months of Richard going missing. And they will never connect those two missing children together because they daren't. Mind you, I've put out enough evidence. It's so much evidence, it's ridiculous. There's photographic evidence linking my father to these children. You know, and there's a chief inspector of police who was involved in that filming. And he helped bring in Richard. So these are the family murders that Adelaide's known for, that my father was involved in. So he had impunity. He could do whatever he wanted. His friends did also. He's the only one that's really been named. I will eventually name those that you know, as soon as they die, I will make it very clear who they were and what they did.
Shame they have to die, isn't it? Shame they have to. So many people get away with so much, and people are like, "Oh, they're old now." Well, so what? So what? You know, they should be named and shamed and taken to task before they get to snuff it. You know, it's just not right. Tell us about the evil people who are awarded their, I call it the academic snobbery, but awarded their degrees. Go into that a little bit, please.
So we have a particular situation with the psychology fraternity in Australia. So if you want to become a psychologist, you have to go through your master's degree. So you actually have to go to the point of learning and getting your master's, which it's a long, I think it's about a 7-year process. I didn't do great in year 12, which is the matriculation, the end of high school. My matriculation score was about 68. It got moderated down to about 63. I've been told by my programmer and my father that I needed to apply for a Bachelor of Science degree. I was 13 or 16 points, 16 points too low to get into this degree. That's a lot of points. It's 16% too low to get into this degree. So I applied, I got rejected. I didn't even get to a Bachelor of Arts degree, which is way lower, but I couldn't even apply for that. I applied, but I certainly couldn't get in. And my father rang me up one day and said, "Did you get in?" And I said, "No." And he was furious. And he got off the phone. He hung up on me, got off the phone. And within a very short period, a matter of half an hour, hours, something like that, I had a phone call. And I was being told by Flinders University, which is one of the main universities here, that I was enrolled in a Bachelor of Science degree, something that I didn't have access to because I didn't have the right marks, and I certainly didn't have the prerequisite studies. I didn't have anything that would get me into a science degree. I was an arts major, a visual art major, actually. I didn't do maths. I did biology. That was the only science subject that I did. I didn't do maths or physics or chemistry, which are prerequisites to get into that degree. Now, I was told when I struggled, I was supposed to be doing things in the science area, and I was trying to learn physics and chemistry for the first time at a university level, never having any background in it. I did very basic maths in year 10. That's the last time I did anything like that. And I was told by my MK Ultra handler and my father that all I had to do to finish that degree, because they wanted me to be a psychologist, was to go to the exams, and I didn't even have to put pen to paper, and I would pass. So I got out of there quick smart. I didn't even complete a year of that Bachelor of Science degree. I completed the philosophy. I did an arts subject. I completed that, but I deferred and then I withdrew. But I have my academics transcripts to prove that I didn't have the marks. Didn't have the prerequisite subjects, but I got my transcript from Flinders University showing that I was allowed into that Bachelor of Science degree. I think that there are an enormous number of academics, particularly in the psychology sciences in my country, who are mentored into those positions. And then they're used. So they are used to, there's a man called Bob Montgomery, who was very high up in the psychological sciences in my country, and he was a raging pedophile, and he was found out, and he was protected. He was protected for a very long time. And the individuals who protected him still have high positions. And these individuals are, pedophile protectors, basically. And this is the hinging of the state child trafficking industry, because they use these psychologists who are mentored into these positions, and academics of all kinds, doctors, academics of all kinds that are mentored by the cult through nepotism and cronyism into these positions, to write up reports to take children from parents that can then be trafficked. It's a horror show, and that's just the child trafficking aspect. That doesn't take into account all the other areas where people are, patting themselves on the back and doing special handshakes and getting in where they can, and people who perhaps they're builders, developers, whatever, they get their special little way in. So this is how people are blackmailed, because if they've got their academic credentials through some means like that, they're not going to speak up about the abuses that they might have suffered as children if they've been allowed to get into a comfortable position. But they certainly have to sell their soul, because you can't go into doing, lying in court and lying about, a protective parent, trying to, what's the word, make the other parent look like a bad person when obviously they are, because a lot of these people are pedophiles. The children are just handed back to the pedophile parents almost every time. It just beggars belief what's going on. So that's how the place has been run for a very long time. I don't think that's going to continue, because I think people are very aware of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many ways we could go here, and we've really covered so much today, and you've really shared so much, and I again just applaud you for it so deeply, and again for people to have less respect for authority in a sensible way. Oh, Danny Henderson, she's suggesting anarchy. Well, okay, it's not so much to be played with, but people just need to really realize and stop being so doughy-eyed or dewy-eyed over singers and actors and politicians and footballers. And it's like, wake up time. It's wake up time. Now, let's bring this beautifully round to what has flowered from you in terms of being selected to speak at Uluru in December 2021, 22, which is beautiful, an honor, and you're so delighted. I love how delighted you are. But tell us a little bit about how you discovered that you can energetically help heal the planet from the ritualizing, bloodletting that is done on the ley lines, and tell us more about that beautiful work that you're now doing.
Well, it's very interesting. About 10, it's probably more like 12 years now ago, I started photographing a lot. Like I just love going in nature and taking photographs. And it was then that I started to realize I'm seeing these circles along these paths. What are they? And intuitively, when I was asking the question, I got, well, they're ley lines. And so I got curious, and I went out and took more photographs in those particular locations, and I took photographs with different cameras, handheld cameras, phone cameras, different phone cameras. And those portals and those ley lines were still visible. And so it sort of struck me, well, people can see them. And then I learnt that in the original Australians in my country call them song lines. And then I learned that there's an interplay between sound and light that creates a frequency, and that these song lines are frequency channels, like tunnels, and that they're actually fifth dimensional, and that that's the repository for the Akashic record. I realized that in a lot of these photographs, there were humanoid apparitions around the ley lines, and I realized that there was the spirit of nature trying to communicate something very profound. And I sat on that information and reams of these photographs for, you know, a good 10 years before I started to speak out about it. But it suddenly occurred to me, speaking in interviews, and I'd spoken it a couple of times before, but then I had an interview with a gentleman called Ben Hawkes. And as we were talking, it kind of came into my mind that part of the reason why I survived was to do the work that needs to be done now, which is bringing loving, healing frequencies, balancing frequencies into the leys, into these spaces that I had been taken into as a child to witness the most horrific rituals. That ritual programming needs to be undone, because it's done for a reason. There's a reason why these dark elements will take the risk of doing these open air rituals and making sure that they have all the police and all of the court system and all of the park rangers in that particular area in their group, so that they will cover it up. It's so important to them to do all of that so they can have these open air rituals. It must be so significantly important that we need to undo it. And I realized how important it was. And Ben and I then, you know, Ben realized the significance and importance of it as well. So he and I co-founded Lay Love Down. So if people want to join us, it's www.laylovedown.com. We are calling on all the light workers of the world to join us, to go out into the ley lines, to sing in frequencies of love and freedom for everybody on earth, to bring us to these higher frequencies, to help the earth to heal. Because it's a very important thing. She needs our help. She needs to heal. Forget all the carbon neutral rubbish. That's all just an overplay. We are made of carbon. It's ridiculous. She needs us to love her and give her our energy. And, you know, her spirit is calling for this as well. So that is my passion. Helping people to see, to learn how to find them, to get out into the leys, to get back into nature. Because I know with all the lockdowns and things that we've had, there was a big reason for that. It wasn't just the things that they said. It was to keep us away from nature, to disconnect. And this is what big cities are like. This is what it's about, disconnect. We have to reconnect with nature. And I think that's going to be natural. I think people are just going to naturally gravitate towards nature again. The more high and sensitive souls that I meet tend to gravitate towards nature. They can't seem to live in the big cities, or if they do, they're doing very important work there. They're anchoring a light there, and it's very hard work, and I take my hat off to them, because I don't think I could manage it. I live in the country for a reason. So that's, you know, it's one thing to have come from such darkness, but this is why I'm here. I believe this is why I survived, because this time that we're in is so incredibly significant, and we need to pay attention to the ley lines now. Help heal the earth, which again is why the Cosmic Consciousness Conference is such a, you know, such an honor, and the timing couldn't be more perfect. It's just amazing. And again, spirit always does that. You know, I'm always helped.
It's so beautiful. Spirit, the light, the love that we all have access to, the wonderful energetic guidance, divine guidance. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You are beautiful. I'm so proud of you. I love you, and I love you coming on my channel and sitting and just being so brave. You know, I just so honor you for that. And, you know, I won't keep continuing to say that, because I know it's not that comfortable. I don't want to be gushing, but I just wanted to, you know, I know there are many people that watch you on my channel and on Shanti's channel on, here we go, on Aquarius Rising Africa. Aquarius Rising Africa, right? ARA, Shanti, Chantal Mayberg. Love that lady. You know, you do a lot with her as well. So we're, you know, between the two of us, Shanti and I are really, you know, loving on you and protecting you, but, you know, giving you a bigger platform, because that's the right thing to do. People out there with big platforms, you selfish muppets, bring Rachel Vaughan on your channel. Stop trying to protect your content and your images. And this is a time of spiritual war that we're in, and we need to be stepping up to the plate, or just get off, just do mind logging in, when people won't. Oh, can't do that. I reached out to a girl once. She's got over 1 million views, and I know her family, and I've worked with her mother, her genius scientist mother, and who created this incredible range of skin products. And I've read for the girl, I've met her and stuff, and I said I wanted to obviously bring awareness to very important subjects in my conference, GISIC, and said, would you consider like having me on, you know what I mean? And she's so sweet when I met her, and so interested in spirituality, and it was like, no, and I think people now need to just stop worrying about, just take that left-hand turn, guys, and get on the track of love and justice for your planet. Let me come to you for final words of the day, darling Rachel Vaughan.
Well, thank you again, Danny, and I love you too, and I love Shanti, and I love, Emma Catherine and all these incredible people like yourselves who, again, this is not easy work. It's triggering, it's distressing. You probably get some people on your channel, like they say, they can't watch anymore, and bless them. I really appreciate that they would even watch some. I just thank you so much for allowing people like me on here, and for being such a, you're such a strong voice for people who've gone through severe trauma. And I understand it's because of the work that you do. You would come across so many people who've gone through these sorts of abuses, because it's really not uncommon. If it's not, SRA, it's, the sexual abuse is rife, absolutely rife. And when you're a reader, you get that whether the client's telling you or not, you will pick up on it. It's really hard. So I can see, this is probably the combination of having to listen or having had listened to so many people going through similar sort of horrors and doing the right thing, which it's a beautiful thing to see. And I really appreciate it, darling. I really do. Thank you.
Well, Rachel, until next time, my love, I bid you adieu, and I give my love to the audience that will watch this. And, be mindful of self and what comes up. Be okay with feelings that come up. And if you need to cry, scream, shout, be outraged, and allow yourself those feelings. We've got to stop shoving the feelings down and keeping the lid on. Let's let the lid out. Let's let the lid off. We all deserve to heal, and everyone is healing from something. So my name is Danny Henderson. My beautiful friend Rachel Vaughan here. We'll see her again, and I will see you guys soon.